Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our casual conversations. And today we are joined by Seth Hamilton.
Hi, Ruth, and everyone else. Nice to meet you. And I'm glad that I'm here to be on the video blog slash podcast.
Yes, I'm so excited that you're here. We've been talking about this for a little while. So here we are today on this wonderful Friday, gloomy Friday in Buffalo, right?
Hey, it's to be optimistic. It's the weekend tomorrow, so I'll
There
take
you
the
go.
rain today. It makes me feel better about having time off tomorrow and not today.
That's true. All right, Seth. So we're talking about finances today, and I'm so glad you're here because you're just going to help us think about some things in regard to finances and thinking about the future and getting organized. And can you start us off by telling us why we should even care about our finances and how we go about thinking about the future?
So to try and turn a complex, thought process and explanation into a simpler one, I think it's just the first thing that people should really consider is just, do you really understand what it is that you have?
Mhm.
Um, there's so many different kinds of assets. There's tangible assets. There's uh, ones that you like, something like time. I think is an asset, but it could also turn quickly into being a debt or like a liability to you, depending on the stage that you are in your life. Um, but truly understanding what it is that you have is, I think, the most important part of really getting an estate plan or just in general generational wealth passing. To make sure it's done correctly, make sure that you've got all your, T's crossed, I's dotted. And on top of that, knowing how it can affect those around you that you care about and how they could negatively or positively affect them for the future. The best way to leave a legacy, I think, is by having something tangible to pass on. And if you're think you're set and you don't want to talk to someone or it's having the hard conversations is what you're worried about, just know that working with a professional is someone that should be in your corner and just to reassure you that you've done everything correctly and that there's nothing that has no stones been left unturned pretty much. So that's what I think the best and most important part about looking at your finances all together really comes down to is just understanding what you have, understanding how it can be, inherited by others, and just to make sure that you're not, putting all your eggs in one basket.
Right. So one of the things I loved is that you sent me some thoughts that you had, and you did assets as far as a column and debts as another column. And for assets, you actually put immediate family members. That's an asset that you can think about as far as planning. And I actually just thought that was so incredible of you. You're expanding the definition and how we think of just finances and planning, caring for ourselves, not just leaving a legacy or money, but caring for ourselves is so important. And you also put in there time and financial professionals. I really love that. That was awesome.
Yeah, because I think everyone sometimes when they look at their assets, they think of tangible. They think
Mm-hmm.
of, okay, let's look at my 401k, let's look at my IRA, let's look at, what my checking account balance is. But realistically, like assets can also be like time. Like if you're younger, you have all the time in the world to a degree, to plan and to make sure that every year it's updated and, you know, relieving that stress that comes with waiting till the last minute or having a life event happen where you're forced into decision making where it's typically not in your best interest what you have to decide on, but it has to be decided. And then also looking at your family as a whole and being like, you know, how I'm not going to try and sit here and pretend like I am an attorney myself, but I know that the probate process in New York State is anything but easy. So if you see your family members and they are someone that maybe like has substantial assets or money or whatever it is, and they're procrastinators or that they could in at one point in their future self have their assets coming your way and you're not prepared or they're not prepared, it could turn into just an absolute chaotic mess that you have to kind of sift through, and it just takes up so much expenses for you and time that could have been handled years prior.
Right. And, behind assets, we have people, right? And what good is it to have substantial assets, but be miserable during life? And I think just having a good handle on what you own and the components that make up what is a good life for you is more than just the asset. It's all of the other things, and some of those things are on your column. But it certainly also brings in this idea of what are your debts and how are you spending your money? And does that make you feel good? And what can we do to get you to the next level? So all of these components just tie in with each other. And I just love how you did that as far as providing your notes to me. I thought that was just, again, so awesome. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All right.
Because
So
realistically, it is a total picture.
yeah.
It's the things that's why I think also like working with like yourself or myself is not where it's like, hey, I'm strictly a money manager. I look at the person as a whole, learn who they are, what they like to do, and try and be more of like a financial partner to them
Mhm.
than telling them what they're doing right and wrong. It's understanding that people want to go and leave your office or a meeting with you and feel good. They don't want to feel stressed. They don't want to feel like that there's questions left unanswered. And sometimes it's difficult to have those conversations, but instead of having with yourself or Googling how to handle things, like I think it'd be better to talk to someone that has a personal touch and understands you. So that's, I think, that the best way a professional like myself and yourself could be an asset to you know anyone watching this video.
Right. It always makes me think of the time in my life where I could say I had X, Y, and Z as assets, but I didn't have some of the other components that you're talking about as far as talking to trusted people and making good decisions. And, it really did affect me. And I have my own story to tell, but it just brings it all home as far as I really understand that it's not just the asset itself, but everything else that plays in.
Definitely.
All right. So, speaking of assets, do you think it's helpful to list out assets, approximate values, and how each asset is titled or beneficiary designations on assets?
I think that's extremely important. If you maybe are someone that's a do-it-yourselfer and you don't necessarily think it's the time to meet with a professional, at least having it organized and in front of you to maybe do an update every year, it helps you regardless. If something spontaneously happens to a family member or to yourself and you need to get things in front of someone so they know how to handle it or where to go next, at least it's written out. You get to gauge yourself, like personally, like how do I think I'm benchmarked against how I should be versus how I can be. And it's a good way to start. Like if you want to have a meeting with like someone like me, it's like, okay, thank you for putting those all into context of what you have. Now I can kind of look at it and be like, have you thought of this? Or maybe taking what you have and making it better, or
Right.
combining things, or just overall keeping people updated on law changes, how they're handled. And just to do that to start, I think is always just a step in the right direction. You're not going to go backwards by putting all your stuff on paper.
Right. And it's so funny because it can be a simple exercise, but it can make people kind of scratch their heads and say, geez, I don't know, or I don't remember, or what did I do here or there? And so I think it's something we all have to go back to as far as the foundation about knowing what we have in regard to assets.
Yeah, you don't want to skip a step and then you go from thinking what you have and then trying to build like an estate plan, or there's always like a piece of the puzzle missing.
Yeah.
And building a foundation is to like, okay, this is what I have, this is what my goals are.
Mm-hmm.
And then just talking to, like, I try and present myself as someone that is gonna have a conversation with you and give you the answers straight. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm not gonna, beat around the bush and just be like, you're doing great here. Did you ever think about this? Or this is another possibility. And then taking their goals into consideration and helping them build those goals and get and achieve them is realistically what I try and do. And if you skip those steps, you don't want to build a foundation and then fall through the floor.
Right. And even if you start out with some notes, you can go back and check, what does the deed say? Let me go to the bank and check my beneficiary designation. Or what did I do with the life insurance? Who's the alternate beneficiary? And so on from there. But just starting somewhere and then filling in the gaps of information is so important. But it's one of those things. It's just, we all need to keep track, and we think that it's sometimes too difficult to just get started, but you can always go back and review and revise.
And also, like, just one other thing is just you have to look at yourself and say, like, I'm unique. Just because a friend did it a certain way or a family member did it a certain way doesn't mean that that way works for you.
Yeah.
So building that customized goal plan
Right.
is crucial, because yes, your neighbor said that they, did LegalZoom and, started all this,
Right.
estate planning, and they feel like they're set. Well, maybe they are,
Right.
you know,
Right.
doesn't mean you fall into that category.
Right. Or a joint bank account is the one way to have a bank account with your child or something.
Exactly.
No, there are other options. It depends.
And that's why, like, it's not, it's like this time of most people's lives that, I say between the ages of like 30 and like 55, you're so focused on growing and building wealth yourself that do you really have time to sit down and methodically think about each
Mhm.
aspect of what you're trying to grow and build? You might, but like, do you really want to spend the 2, 3, 4 hours at home at night, or would you rather spend those 2, 3 hours at home, with your kids, or going to, plays, recitals, sporting events, and being there, and then having someone else take that stress and just do it for you,
Yeah.
but with you at the same time.
Yeah. What I find interesting is sometimes if I give an estate planning type of questionnaire to somebody, and just for an example, I say, what real estate do you own? They may have their house, but they'll totally forget about some other real estate that they own. Or if I say business interest, they'll forget that they're a part owner of investment real estate that's in an LLC, and so on. And people actually don't even think of these things as far as listing them. And then we're thinking of planning, and it's, oh, well, I forgot, I do have this, sort of like, it's really not that big a deal. I didn't think I needed to put it down or something. And it
Exactly.
totally changes everything that we've thought of. And I can give so many more examples, but that's why it's so crucial to be listing assets and be thorough. And you may start out with something, but you need to go back and review and revise and update. People really need to get a handle on what they have.
And yeah, and I totally agree. Like, I've heard it so many times myself. Like, someone comes in for their first meeting, and you send them a quick, like, hey, just list some things that you have, what you are looking to achieve, and then they come in and all of a sudden it's like 5 other things get brought up, and you're like,
Right,
just because you asked a question, or you reworded something a different way, or even you just straight up asked them about a specific thing, and they're like, oh,
right,
well, yeah, I have that, and you're like,
right.
and it's not their fault. It's not that they're trying to purposely hide that from you. It's just,
Yeah.
how many things can you possibly remember without writing it down?
And there's so many examples of, you think it's a joint account. Oftentimes I will say, please go to the bank and check what is on file, exactly how it is on file. Is it a joint account with rights of survivorship and so on? And people have been surprised, and they say, thank you, because we thought it was this, but it's actually that. And it's amazing. Again, it's another opportunity to get clear on what you have.
And also, you have to think about human error.
Right,
Like, as like an unknown liability.
right,
You think this whole time that you have a joint account, and realistically you have something completely different, because the person that set you up at the bank,
right,
maybe they were new, maybe they just checked the wrong box.
Right.
And, it's just something that to make sure that have someone in your corner that's understanding everything and kind of being that little bit of a push to be like, hey,
Yeah.
just go check it. It's worst case scenarios, it's a good shape, and you
Yeah.
move on.
And I think there's layers to this. So I always say to people, you're doing what you're doing now, and this is great, but you're going to get better at it. And next year,
Mhm.
you're going to be starting off at a much better place when you look at this and start adding to it or updating it. And then, continuing on from there. It's like your chance to continue kind of getting better at all of this and just feeling that much more comfortable about everything and what you have. I have so many examples. A famous one in my mind is that these people desperately wanted to avoid probate and everything was joint, 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 joint. Wouldn't you know, upon the person passing, totally forgot about some old stock certificates, paper stock certificates.
Yep.
So it happens, but it gives you the chance to get better, kind of build upon your layers as far as what you're doing and remembering and going back and reviewing and updating.
And also, like, being able to talk to someone and just have a general education and growing with that person is ideal, because I never want to be the person that is talking at someone, but
Mm-hmm.
taking in what they're saying, then giving them general education on it, because there is a certain portion where you will have to do it on your, like, by yourself or on your own. And I feel like if I'm not putting that person back out in the world with an education or a general understanding as to what they just came in and talked to me about, then I'm doing them a disservice. So it helps you make also future plans or decisions like a little easier to make. Like,
Oh,
just like,
yeah.
hey, like, even if I don't understand fully, I can call Seth, I can call Ruth, I can call whoever I'm working with and just be like, this is the correct way of thinking, right? Like, I should be doing this. And,
Yeah.
generally that's what you gain doing this. So
And people have a comfort level of talking to you after they've talked to you for a certain amount of time. I've had a couple conversations recently where there were monies given to children or allowing children to build on a parent's land, or thinking it's actually this money given was a loan, but the transaction is not actually a loan, it's really a
yep.
gift, and so on and so on. And the muck and the confusion and sort of the craziness that people get into, I'm not sure where it all stems from. It can be different for everybody, but part of it is not liking clarity. People kind of want to sometimes be a little not sure what they're doing, or they don't want to kind of confirm details. They don't want to set things in stone a certain way. But it's certainly, there's so many chances for people to talk about these kinds of arrangements to get better at what they're ultimately trying to do, so they don't get into the muck. Because I just a few recent conversations I've had, I go, oh my goodness, this is not good, and I can tell that the people are not really ready to have those kinds of conversations.
Right. And some people never get there, and you can only help someone as much as they want the help in return.
Good
And
point. Good
it's
point.
and it's not that you say, like, forget those people. It's just more or less it's a two-way street. And the more you provide for me, well, the more I can provide for you. It's kind of like, I mean, I heard this analogy recently and I loved it. It was like, what kind of doctor are you going to go see? Are you going to go see a general doctor if you have, like, you have to get screened for something? No, you're going to go to a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we technically are, is we're specialists in our field. And once you get to a certain level of working with me, then that's when the specialist gets moved to your, side of the table there. And it's like, okay, well, outside of the assets and liabilities, let's make sure those assets and liabilities turn into
Right.
the, generational transfers, or that's legally bound, so that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right. Or even just, enjoying your life and feeling comfortable, confident about what you're doing. Yeah, I think of so many examples when you're talking, and that two-way street idea, that is a beautiful thought right there. Yes. You can only do so much. You have to have the willing participant. And I think that brings me back to this idea of an estate planning questionnaire. We've got to at least have you get going with putting down, let's start it off, your assets, list them out one by one, approximate values on each asset, how each asset is titled, and if there are any beneficiary designations. And if you can't do that, then it's a problem because we need to get some information.
Right. I mean, I have my own personal, tie to some of this because like my dad passed like, 2019, right before the COVID shutdown and everything like that. And it was utter chaos. Like, so like firsthand I saw it, but at the same time, like it made me feel like kind of passionate about it in the sense of like, I don't want to see other or hear about other people having to go through this when it's completely avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
It could be completely avoidable. It can be completely taken care of and no more stress, no issues when it comes down to the unexpected, like early death or those are some of like the unknown liabilities people that don't might not think about or don't want to think about is like, what
Right.
if someone in your family who's the main earner gets into a car crash, and they can't do that anymore? What if someone unexpectedly passes? You know, it's why not get prepared now when everything is, in a good state instead of waiting for it to break on you
Right.
is that's kind of how I, like to
Right.
talk to people about it.
You're always going to do the best when you are calm and can plan and make better decisions in that kind of state versus some frantic, you know, crazy time when things just, it's not the right time to be making decisions at all. And maybe you can't even at that point make decisions or do what needs
Right.
to be done. Yeah.
Exactly. And then that's when things get, you get things that are inherited that cost you an arm and a leg because it's, got to be expedited or it's got to happen now. It can't happen later. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's the amount of loss that could be generated turns an asset into now a liability.
Yeah, that is so interesting how you think of that. And thank you for sharing that about your dad. I'm so sorry to hear that, but certainly it gives you that much more perspective about everything that you do. But yeah, I really appreciate how on the debt side, you listed out stress. You listed out time that you can't get back. You listed out living outside of your means. I mean, people don't think of those things as far as debts go, but they truly negatively impact you, right? It's part of everything that we should be thinking about when we're thinking about planning.
Definitely. It's like, what, like, don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait till something breaks for you to try and fix it. It's the one thing that I can always say. And like, I know sometimes it's difficult for individuals to find the time to, work with someone else or, kind of put these assets down. But think about how much time it's going to take you to try and put the, pieces back together when it's just been completely disintegrated. It's like
Right.
right in front of you. It's like, I think taking an hour this week to put down assets is going to be a lot better than trying to figure out what assets are even there. That'll
Yeah.
take you 10, 20 hours.
Yeah.
Like just to
Yeah.
find one thing. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's why I'm saying like time is like the ultimate, I think, asset, liability, debt. It's if
Yeah.
you can start now, start now.
Yeah. And expanding like you have done on the concept of assets and debts, I think if you think about your own mindset and how that is impacting all of your decisions and how you're thinking of things. I have my own story, of incredible turmoil because my mindset threw me for certain loops that I wish I could go back in time and redo. But, I think it all factors in. We always just think, it's assets and it's debts and we're done. But no, like you said, it's time, financial professionals and stress and all of that affects what we're talking about.
And like another big, like I guess like I can think of one thing that might be able to take time, which is not tangible, and turn into something tangible is like I'm sure a lot of individuals are having to deal with this now is putting someone in a nursing home and having that 5 year look back. So if you try and start that planning at age 80, that's that 5 year look back window is not only, yes, it's there's still a 5 year time limit, but it's definitely feels like there's so much pressure on not or trying to avoid nursing home for like 5 years instead of starting the asset moval or changing the names on like the deeds, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Instead of starting at like 55. You know,
Yeah.
it's just that stress that builds and builds and builds, and it's
Well,
something that you can do.
yeah, I think it brings us back to the idea that there's no one way to live. There are no decisions that are good for everybody. It always goes back to what do you want and what are your goals. But I just think that finances, assets, how we think of it all, obviously it affects us. We've just
Oh
said
yeah.
it. So it's part of living well, right?
Living well, living less stressful,
Yeah.
and then just making sure that what you've done so hard to, build and create in this life is passed on as much as you can.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to kind of run through assets that people could think about when they're writing down the assets that they have at home? They're writing down their list, and then as well potential debts. Just take us through some ideas so people can say, "Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that," or just help them as far as getting some thoughts down.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we talked about some of them just now, but like I think the major ones you want to go through are, retirement accounts, checking accounts, savings, pensions. Those are like your, the ones that most people genuinely have like a almost like a no-brainer thought. But
Mm-hmm.
other things to think about are assets would be like your house, the land that the house is built on, vehicles, vacation or secondary homes or other plots of land that you've purchased. If you
Mm-hmm.
are a small business owner, you
Mm-hmm.
have, your portion of the money you put into the business, anything you've bought in through the business, along with land and, the actual physical building itself. And then realistically that kind of sums up, I think, the main assets. There will be, unique ones out there, but I think those are like the ones you really want to think about, like anything you've
Right.
purchased for and they could sell tomorrow for some sort of return is typically an asset that you want to think about.
Right.
And then debts would be, like mortgages, line of credits, HELOCs, uh credit card debts, pretty much any type of loan. And
Right.
loans to think about too is personal, you have business, you have car loans, you have 401k loans, which can cause an issue down the road if it gets transferred to you as a beneficiary. If there's a loan outstanding, that amount that you're supposed to get is reduced. So the loan gets paid back. And anything that is a current expense, reoccurring is a debt. I'm not trying to make it sound where it's like, I'm talking to someone that doesn't understand what a debt is, but there's other ways. Like if you had an agreement with someone else to pay them back X amount of dollars because they loaned you money, that could be a debt that comes up. So anything that you'd be on the line for to pay for if someone was to like pass is something to consider. And like I said, it might be unique, it might be different, but that's also when you can always call myself or you and just be like, hey, is this something I need to be concerned about?
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea is some people think, oh, I'm not going to worry about that, or I don't really need to list that out, or, that's going to be fine because I know the other things are going to pay that off. No, you've got to be just listing it
Yeah,
out just to be very clear. First of all, we need to know about it. Second of all, there could be some planning that will be very beneficial. And again, it all ties in, but don't think that something's off the table because in your mind it doesn't count or it'll be taken care of another way or something like that. Just very
exactly.
important to get it all down. Yeah. All right. Now, unknown liabilities. I'm looking at your notes now. You have fabulous possibilities here to think
Mhm.
about because those are the things that you just don't know, right? They could come up in the future. So we think of those things. So I have them right in front of me. Do you want to list them out a little bit for your that
I
you
can list them
remember?
out.
Do you have
I can list some of them out and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about them because like
okay.
this is kind of how my brain works is like unknown liabilities are maybe things that eventually are going to be something you have to take care of, but there's also things that maybe some people don't think about. So like some of those ones that you might think about now are like funeral expenses, Paying off some of these like credit card debts if anyone like you're supposed to inherit like an estate, mortgage debts of someone else. But other things that are like unknown liabilities are future, like I put like future disability. So like someone gets into a car crash or unexpected like fall at work and they don't get, certain funds, or they were making the income for your family, like that's something you're not planning for. Like an early death, someone you think they're gonna, everyone in your family's lived to 95 and then someone passes at 50. That's something that you can't really plan for, but you can at least be prepared for. Um, Debt collectors and creditors, think about it as like, you owe your best friend $50 and then, you pass away, and then your kid has to pay your friend $50 because he comes knocking, after that, he wants his money back. That's the same idea. And you don't know this friend, but they're there. Medical bills, another one that's typically not a huge issue, but sometimes like because the insurance will take care of it. But there's some out there where you don't know what kind of insurance they have, and medical bills can become outrageous,
Yeah.
and they will go after any sort of asset to get their money. So if they're not protected on that end, good luck. Um, Capital gains. You don't like you think that if you're gonna inherit a house, it's just going to be great. We're going to sell, we're going to take all the money, but then comes, come tax time, if you just received $100,000 from selling your parents' house, like that's all possibly taxable, and you
Pe-
lose
yeah.
up to
People,
20% of it. It's like,
people, people don't think about planning in a way that's going to be helpful sometimes, but I could talk a lot about that. And then when a person passes, I just had this conversation yesterday about getting appraisals on real estate at date of death so that we know what we're looking at for a step up in basis and things like that. There's things that you have to be aware of from the planning end and then right through when somebody passes and what you should do to make it better for yourselves. And you're right, unknown liabilities, people aren't expecting these things and it can be quite a surprise for people.
yeah, and especially like that's what the benefit of like talking to myself or yourself would be, is like making someone aware of these liabilities or possibilities. Like there's like typically there's a route that every sort of asset takes. And just to then basically break it down into the future what ifs is really what this kind of boils down to is, do you want to lose, you have $1 million coming to you. Do you want to lose 350,000 of it because of these things that you didn't plan for? Or do you want to have it in a certain way where it comes to you $1 million and you're keeping
Right.
it, you
Right.
know? So
Right. So
it's,
yeah, you have to really flesh this out properly. Sometimes outright gifting is going to be harmful as far as capital gains. And so we think of these things when we're planning. But I
mm,
love how you've listed everything. All right. So I'm looking at your list. I know you have some more there if you want to keep going.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into like a ton of these other ones because it's kind of where, like I said, I turn time into a, liability, like I said, if you're starting at 30 compared to like 85, like it's time is, ever evolving.
You know what I
Poor
love you
plan,
put? I love poor planning.
poor planning. Yeah,
I'm like,
this
oh
next
my
one is
God, Zach, that's beautiful.
because
Unknown liabilities, because people are walking around and they don't know what planning is or is not in place that will affect them. It was really good to see that under unknown liabilities. I love that.
you never know. Like someone could, like you could have someone walk into your office and they could have planned everything out, and it could have been planned out just not for them. It could have been generic, plan that they copied
Yeah,
off a
yeah,
website, and they're like, "Oh, I'm good," and you're like,
yeah.
"Nah, no, you're not."
And it's the shock sometimes.
Yep.
I'm thinking of one instance in particular right now in my mind where it was complete shock when a person passed and the surviving spouse is dealing with it, but it is not a good situation. And I can tell that they did not do the planning that could have been done.
Yep.
So it's not a good position to be in.
It's not. And then I guess I'll leave with like two more. Is like one for me, like that I think was like retiring or receiving assets in a market downturn, market crash. Like you were expecting to get X and now you're getting Y because the market's been down 20% of the year.
Mm-hmm.
it's you don't know. You can plan and have like a idea, but think about how it was affected during like the first 6 months of when COVID was actually like shutting everything down. It just
Yeah.
plummeted.
Yeah.
And if you don't have things in place, that's an issue.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is family members that could become liabilities later on because of
Mm.
their bad planning.
Wow, that's good. You know what?
Um,
Go ahead.
I think it's just it's something that is unknown to everyone. It's hard to really
Right.
plan yourself for that, but to
Right.
have a place where there's the contingency plan almost is how you kind of avoid that.
Right.
But I know you could definitely go in on
Oh,
family members becoming a
every one of
liability.
these. We have so much to talk about. One thing I have to say that I also just love is that you put trusting the wrong person
Yep.
down as an unknown liability. My goodness, Seth, when's your book coming out?
In 5
That is
years.
so
No,
good. I just love it. That is so good.
thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the way my mind works, and it's it's a course of evolving yourself, and
Hmm.
you have to think that way sometimes, and it's good to work with someone that also thinks that way. So
Right. Right. You have to expand your mind a bit about what everything, what we're talking about and how things actually happen and things that
yeah,
are affected,
yeah,
all
not
of it.
everything's black and white. It's
Yeah.
that gray area.
Good. That's it. Right. Right. All right. I think that we should pick this up on the next video. That was awesome. I loved everything we talked about. Maybe moving forward, we can continue on with this, kind of talk about the interplay with finances and financial and estate planning and things to help people with.
Definitely. No, it was a blast, and I had fun talking about it, and I look forward to the next episode here.
Awesome, Seth. Thank you so much. So I have to do my little ending here. This video, as with any video I do put out, is for educational purposes only. It does not establish an attorney-client relationship. And I look forward to seeing you on another video.